Hi everyone, we're looking now at the Module 5. We're looking at Keohane, I think mostly in this video. The most popular question was one about Keohane, about moralism. It's a very well put together question, so I'm going to deal with that one. There's another one that goes with it that I think is, it got a lot of upvotes, and so I want to address it. It's worth addressing, and so that's what we'll do. First of all, I think it's important, so let me give you the question, I suppose. I found Keohane's article. I know there's an E in there, but we pronounce it Keohane. Keohane's article to be fairly clear and organized regarding his theorem on the advances liberalization has made in the area of moralism and legalism. But have questions regarding the following quote on withholding the final praise. Right? He says, I'm going to give two cheers for moralism, and I'm going to withhold the third cheer. Right? So that's what's being referenced there. He first gives praise to moralism, stating that it has made way to the spread of democratic values, as well as enhancing legitimate hegemony for certain nation states. Let's stop and read that again. As well as enhancing legitimate hegemony for certain nation states. All right, keep that in your mind. However, he states the following, right? But we withhold the third cheer. The realists are right to point out that power corrupts, so we need to beware that moralism can generate arrogance, facilitate the distortion of reality, and even conceal nefarious purposes. All right. Can you give me an example of times that moralism has caused these negative effects? I would like more practical examples on how the advancement of moralism could potentially be abused when it appears that the efforts to promote societal good. Thanks. It's a difficult question to answer, like that last part in particular. Right? It's a dangerous question to answer from my own perspective, right? Because then that sort of sets me in some sort of political, some political stance, right? Because now I'm going to decide what's moral and what's not moral. I'm going to decide when morality was used for good purposes and when it was used for bad purposes, and that sort of evaluation, right, about whether or not somebody was really moral or not. It's one that it's controversial to take, right? But I'll have a go, and probably I'll try and hide behind like the views of other people or something like that, right? Because to be honest with you, I don't. Well, anyway, let's carry on. Let's address one thing first. This idea of withholding the third cheer. Remember, what's Doyle trying to do? What's his big aim? His big aim is this is Keohane. Sorry. What's Keohane trying to do? I think this is right. Yeah, no, it is right. I was getting mixed up between Doyle and Keohane. So what Keohane's trying to do is he's trying to say, look, E.H. Carr has a point. Right, and the liberalism that the big liberals, the big important liberals today in international relations were putting forward, it's not the same as the utopianism that Carr was railing against back in the middle of the 20th century. Honestly, we're not just utopians come back to life from that first conflict that the realists beat us in. No. We've taken on board some of the realists' arguments, and we've progressed, right? And so part of what he's doing here is he's just justifying the existence of liberalism, right? So bear that in mind, right? That this is a sort of, in some way, that this goal, in order like to sort of shore up the place of liberalism in international relations literature, he has to give some sort of ground. He has to show that, look, I have accepted this criticism. I have taken on board the lessons that we learned from the first great conflict in international relations between the realists and the utopians, which the utopians didn't really take part in, but that's for another. I think we've already talked about that. So bear that in mind as we go on. So now he's saying, so he's only given 3 cheers for moralism, and as is quoted in the question, yes, I think it's quoted in the question. Maybe it isn't. The realists are right to point out the power corrupts. So he doesn't mention Carr, but he mentions Carr earlier on. That's who he's talking to. And so you've got to understand Carr's perspective, right? So what's Carr's perspective? Let's go back a week or so into Carr, and what do we get from Carr? We get the claim that, nothing succeeds like success. Yes, it was morally right. It's always the thing that works, the thing that we did, the thing that we successfully did was always morally right. Isn't that lucky, right? That's Carr's argument, right? Carr says, look, power isn't a result of morality. Morality is a result of power. It's a function of power, right? Whoever has the power, whoever can make can exercise their will, they can come up with a moral justification about why they're doing it, and it looks good to us, right? Because they succeeded. The other thing on this is, right, when the morality that's been professed seems right to you and me, then we go, yeah, of course, morality is great, right? If we look at the things in here, we have a responsibility to protect. To a lot of people, that'll sound like a great thing. NATO's use of military force to prevent. I'm quoting here from Cohen. NATO's use of military force to prevent the domination of neighboring peoples by Serbia. That to a lot of people will sound moral, right? Certainly the way it's presented there, right? We don't want people to be dominated, and we want to help them if they are being dominated. But what's he talking about there, right? He's talking about Kosovo, right? He's talking about NATO bombing of Serbia. He's talking about NATO bombing of Belgrade that blew up a Chinese embassy, right? Blew up a Chinese embassy, blew up civilian bridges. Yeah, it didn't destroy the city. That's too much, but it sort of impacted life in a major city for a lot of people. Now, is that moral? That it becomes much more of a tricky question, I would say, right? Than NATO's use of military force to prevent the domination of neighboring peoples. That sounds moral. Blowing up civilian bridges and Chinese embassies in Belgrade seems like it's at least more questionable, right? Why did we do that? Was that necessary? Was that the best way to achieve the thing that we were trying to achieve? Should we even be trying to achieve anything in the Balkans at all, right? That's quite far away. Is it vital to our national interests? Shouldn't we let them get on with it, right? Why did we choose the Kosovo side over the Serb side? You remember, right, Samuel P. Huntington has an answer for that. Perhaps, although maybe it's not as clear as I at first thought, right? Because you've got the Kosovo Albanians, right? I assume Huntington would put in the Islamic civilization. They got the Serbs are in so neither of them in the Western civilization, right? But I don't know. So anyway, so yeah, like that's what I'm going to start to say. I'm not. That's one example, maybe, right? The advancement of moralism. If it really is moral, and if we really do agree with it, of course the Russians didn't want the NATO to bomb Belgrade. Of course the Serbs didn't want NATO to bomb Belgrade. Of course the Chinese weren't very happy that their embassy was blown up. Look at Libya as well, right, which it also mentions in here, I think, under R2P. Oh no, it's the same paragraph actually. It's under the Serbia under the Serbia sentence. Actually, it's the same sentence. Last year to overthrow the Gaddafi regime in Libya, right? That was an exercise where the Russians and the Chinese sort of allowed that to happen in the UN Security Council, but later regretted it, right? So they felt like it was at first moral, right? The idea was, I think initially, to protect a group of civilians that were under threat from Gaddafi's forces. But then what happens is, but then we overthrow the regime, right? We overthrow the Gaddafi regime. The Chinese and the Russians think that that's not moral, right? They think that might be something more to do with power, with Western power, with what's in Western interests, and they didn't really want us to go that far. And so now it's much harder to get this responsibility to protect thing through the United Nations Security Council, because they say, well, look what happened last time. We thought we were going to protect this group of citizens, and now we've participated with you in regime change. So those are maybe perhaps more practical, more specific sort of events where, depending on your politics, you might not have a problem with either of those things, right? Certainly if you're an Albanian, Kosovo Albanian, you certainly think that the NATO action against Serbia was highly moral, but the Russians don't think that. And so when there's a question of morality there, and this is Carr's point, I'm just reiterating Carr's point, but given some more contemporary examples. Like Carr says, when the British and the Americans always seem to be doing things, they always seem to be on the side of God, they always seem to be on the side of right. It's not about morality. It's about and this is the whole realist. This is from the Malian dialogue, right? It's from the strong do what they want, and the weak suffer as they must. And then we at the end we can sort of add some morality to it and explain why that was the right thing to do, the good thing to do, the proper thing to do, but ultimately like it was done for other reasons. So again, Cohen wants to show that he's taken that criticism on board, that he's saying, look, let's be careful. Of course, they as absurd as it sounds to us and as perverse as it sounds to us and to me, no doubt that the Nazis, the real believers within the Nazi Party, saw what they were doing in terms of some sort of morality, some sort of right and wrong, that this is the right thing to do. They saw that, and of course to us that's completely absurd and perverse. And what's to say that our bombing of Belgrade, while not at all on par with Nazi atrocities, but the principle that to us it might seem moral, it might seem right, but to other groups they might not see it as moral. So and it also depends on whether you see it as, you know, morality as being something that is unchanging and true and universal, or whether you think of morality in relative terms. You know, what's right for you and what is not right for this group of people over there. They can have their morality and we can have our morality. If on the other hand, it's very hard to you won't agree with any, like you wouldn't, you would, there would never be a good enough example if you are someone that says, look, the United States and Western Europe on the whole, especially when it's acting in concert with the United States, NATO, is morally correct, right? God's on their side. They have the right. They're liberal, democratic. There's the God on the side, but then there's also, look, liberal democracy is the best way. Everybody should be liberal and democratic. And there's several people that feel this, right? Every country deserves to live in freedom. Who are we to say that they don't deserve the same things that we have, right? Free access to whatever food or TV that we want, freedom to speak and to free elections, freedom to oppose the government. Why shouldn't everybody have that? Everybody should have that. That's the right thing. And so let's go and do that. Let's go and make that happen. If we can. Because you could say like that's everybody should have that, but we can't make it happen. Or you can say everybody can do that and we can make it happen. And so we'll go and do it. And that's certainly neoconservatism, right? That's certainly in the United States. That's certainly what we did. What we're not doing so much of right now, right? But what some people still hold that we should be doing. And so in that case, right, you would give certainly 3 cheers for moralism. But Cohen wants to show that, hey, not all liberals are neoconservatives, which sounds funny, but it's not as funny as it sounds. Not all liberals believe that we have the moral authority to go and change the world into the image of the United States. And here's Cohen who doesn't quite believe that, right? He only gives 2 cheers rather than 3 cheers for moralism. Another good example, the Nazis is the extreme one, and it's a difficult one to really incorporate very well, but the war on terror. Certainly to many people, it will seem moral to kill terrorists, right? And to kill terrorist leaders, right? To bomb Iran, to bomb Iranian generals who are visiting Iraq, in order to prevent the death of innocent people. That will sound moral to some people, absolutely. But what about when Russia does that, right? When Russia does that in Chechnya, right? When they kill what they have deemed as terrorists there too. Does that still seem as moral, right? So that's part of the argument as well. Like, is it moral if everybody does it, right? Is it moral? So it's something that's moral that the United States does. It should be also moral if Russia do it or if China do it. If there's that universal fixed moralism. So that's why I think those are some reasons why Cohen might be. And hopefully those are some real examples too, right, that I've given you. Some solid examples for you to think about. Was the bombing of Belgrade, was that moral? Was the overturning of the Gaddafi regime moral? Or the Saddam Hussein regime, was that moral? which we didn't talk about. Is it moral to blow up? I've forgotten the general's name now, but the guy that you know the one very recently in Iraq, but he was Iranian. He was we took him out. Was that moral too? If you're like all those things are 100% moral, and whoever was doing it, if the Russians did that, that would be just as moral, then you're not a fan of Kohen, and that's fine. All right, I'm going to stop there.